You might be asking what a student success team does and how do they do it? Student success teams follow a continuous improvement cycle. This cycle starts with progress monitoring all students with key indicators. The key predictive indicators that student success teams look at are attendance, behavior, course performance, and measures of well-being. Well-being measures include school connectedness or belonging. For example, how many students are involved with an extracurricular activity, or how many students report having a trusted adult at the school. Teams then gather insights from staff, students, parents, and the community to collect further information in order to understand underlying root causes and to develop solutions. With data and insights in hand, teams take action. Improvement actions can be directed at the school, grade, classroom, small group, and/or individual level. The goal here is to be proactive in creating conditions that help all students thrive. But the cycle doesn't stop there. Effective student success teams evaluate and monitor the impact of the actions they took. They use continuous improvement approaches to modify interventions until they work. Let's take a deeper look at this process. This process applies when teams are examining whole school, group, or even individual student data. Regardless of focus, the same process applies. It is important to note that this is not a linear process, and teams can be flexible in visiting different stages based on need. Student success teams will analyze real-time, actionable, holistic data using a data protocol. Their goal is to answer the question, where do lots of students need support? Then, they will dive into a root cause analysis where they hear from the voices of the actual students to discover the actionable reasons for the trends identified in the data. Using the human-centered design process, the student success team collaborates with students, families, caregivers, or community organizations to think about how they can help as many students as possible. They work together on a strategic action plan that includes the why, who, and with what supports an intervention can be created. The team develops communication to ensure that they build awareness and buy-in. They continue to measure and monitor progress to know if it is working. And finally, they celebrate wins and recognize efforts. Let's take each one of these phases in turn. A holistic data view includes real-time, actionable, holistic data that shows the research-based predictive indicators of attendance, behavior, and course performance, as well as measures of well-being, sometimes referred to as the small ABCs: agency, belonging, and connectedness, all together in one view. Adding measures of post-secondary readiness is also highly recommended. A data protocol is chosen by the team to analyze trends, patterns, and relationships. The goal of the data protocol is to help the team answer the question, where do lots of students need support? Presenting data in different formats can be beneficial for a team, as each team member may interpret things in different ways. Formats can include summary paragraphs, line graphs, bar charts, and spreadsheets. What matters is finding the formats that work best for your team. One way to display data is by looking at whole school data. Here we see an example of a school that is comparing school-wide ABC data across 3 quarters. On the side is a chart that displays the percentage of students that are off track, sliding, on track, or high achieving in each predictor. It also includes the percentage of students flagging for multiple EWIs. This is a quick way for teams to determine where lots of students may need support. Finding trends, patterns, and relationships in the data helps student success teams target their support. A trend is the general direction of data over time and can be used to forecast future behavior. A pattern describes a recurring sequence within the data, and relationships show how changes in one variable are connected to another variable. Based on the patterns, trends, and relationships identified, a school can choose root cause analysis questions that respond to the data. Consider this example dataset. In this example, the team looked at the data and decided to focus their efforts on an intervention for the 41 students that are flagging for math course performance, behavior, and no trusted adult. Here is some guidance on how to look for relationships in the data. Begin by contemplating, what do students need in order to be successful in this area? Then consider obstacles or common root causes you may have heard. Break them down one at a time to see where you can target the most students. For example, if you're thinking about students who are struggling in math, ask yourself, what do they need to be successful? They need to be in school, they need to engage in class, they need to complete their work, and their knowledge should be reflected in assessments. You can better define the problem by looking at data from this point of view. How many students are flagging in math? 100. How many students are not flagging in attendance as well? 87. How many are in math class and engaged? 57. How many are in class, engaged, and doing work? 52. How many are in class, engaged, completing work, but still failing assignments? 37. These students are most likely lacking key skills or foundational knowledge since they are doing all of the other things that are necessary for success in math. Once a school has identified a group of students to create a targeted intervention for, they must get to the root cause. Getting to the root cause before choosing an intervention is the most efficient way to get results in a student success system. Root cause analysis includes both quantitative and qualitative data. This is the time for schools to invite the voices of staff, students, families, and the community in to find out more about the data that was analyzed. In our example, the Student Success Team chose to conduct empathy interviews with small groups of students. As a team, they met and discussed the questions that would best lead them to the root cause of the 3 flags. Interview questions included, describe a time when you were successful in math. What are some triggers for frustration in math class? What coping strategies do you use when you are triggered? And are you accepted for who you are at our school? After gaining answers from students, the team meets again to go over the answers and look for recurring themes. Once they were able to narrow down some of the root causes, it was up to the team to consider their locus of control when deciding what the most strategic root cause to address would be. This team chose to focus on relationships with adults in the building. In the human-centered design phase, the Student Success Team prioritizes deeply understanding students, challenging their own assumptions, redefining problems, and creating innovative solutions that can be prototyped and tested. Importantly, it is not a rigid and linear process. Rather, it is flexible and adaptable as an approach that allows for revisiting earlier stages as new insights emerge. Listening to the voices of students, families, and the community is an integral part of the student success system. Design thinking phases include empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. You want to get to know your end user well, define the true challenge, think of many solutions, prototype early, and test out ideas. In our example, the team identified strong supportive relationships with adults as an area worthy of prioritizing. Applying the design thinking process, empathy, and define stages, the team chose to solicit student feedback on their plans in order to collaborate on potential interventions that applied to their local context. Through conversations with students, the team asked and answered questions like, how might we strengthen connections between adults and multilingual learners? Or, how might adults reconnect with students after a conflict? Students, teachers, and district volunteers sat alongside each other to brainstorm as many ideas as they could. Once there are some ideas on the table to prototype, student success teams move into strategic action planning. The goal is to answer, why are we using this intervention? Who is going to be responsible for following up on what part of the intervention, and what supports do we need to make this intervention possible? Utilizing the backward design model, teams should begin intervention planning by creating a SMART goal and agreeing upon measures of success. The questions to ask are, how will we know if we are successful, and what data can we track to see progress? When planning your SMART goal, remember, they are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Then, the team decides what data will be tracked to see if there is progress in the right direction. Point persons are chosen to lead the implementation, and the team decides on a timeline. Included in the timeline are intervals to revisit data to measure and monitor success. The Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle is one example of an effective change management model a student success team can use when planning their intervention. In our example, the Student Success Team set a goal of 50% of students flagging for math behavior and no trusted adult will report having a trusted adult using the shared student-teacher lounge with games within 3 months. Their goal would be measured and monitored by a weekly survey given to the original focus group of students to see if their answer had changed about having a trusted adult in the building. Planning out the process step by step will help the team to break down the intervention into smaller steps. As you can see in our example, the team has tasks to complete in between the measure and monitor stages, which are highlighted in a light orange band. Creating a communication plan is an important next step. Collaborating with staff, students, families, and the community when creating the communication plan is a pivotal key to buy-in and success. The goal is to answer, how do we build awareness of our intervention and buy-in for students, staff, and families? As part of your communication plan, make sure you carefully consider these 6 questions. In our example, the Student Success Team wanted families, students, staff, and community partners all to be aware of the intervention. They described the intervention as beginning with a relationship audit during a professional development that encouraged staff members to identify 2 to 3 students they would intentionally build relationships with. The Student Support Lounge was a space that could be utilized to build these relationships. They detailed the rules of the lounge and included a system for recognition when the room was used. Data would be tracked and shared weekly. The team chose various means of communication, which varied by group. Finally, as a system for feedback, the team decided that suggestion boxes would be posted in the room. Once the intervention is started and the communication has gone out, it is time to turn to measuring and monitoring. The goal is to answer, how do we know it's working? This is all about looking at data and getting feedback from students and staff to track your SMART goal. A suggestion is to use a protocol like the Start, Stop, Continue protocol when analyzing results. The Student Success Team begins by analyzing the data of the measurement that they had set for success. The team should also talk about implementation levels and impact to see if there is something that they can do to improve the intervention. In our example, our team found that they needed to make some changes to help with timing. They opened the room up to groups instead of just individuals and began allowing families and community partners to use the room. Finally, don't forget to celebrate. This is hard work, and teams and students deserve recognition. We celebrate wins and recognize efforts, and both are key motivators that can go a long way for the team morale. Each small win creates a sense of progress, generating positive energy to propel your team forward. In our example, the team was able to see positive momentum week after week, and after consulting with students, staff, and families, they figured out ways to celebrate and recognize wins and efforts. Regularly acknowledging small victories can also shift your perspective towards a more optimistic mindset and encourage buy-in. Ask yourself, what should be celebrated and how do people prefer to be recognized? In summary, the Student Success Team looks at holistic data and uses a data protocol to identify groups of students who would benefit from an intervention. They then conduct a root cause analysis that incorporates insights from staff, students, families, and the community. They collaborate on ideas for interventions, choose a SMART goal, and data points to measure progress towards achieving that goal. They communicate this plan, measure, monitor, and celebrate. This process does not happen overnight, so be patient. It is not linear, so be flexible. As teams establish themselves and do the work, they build supportive relationships and strengthen student-centered mindsets. Remember, the best student success system is the one that teams co-create in their schools.